when we're born and we enter into this world, the very nature of our experience is such that we begin to reach out and explore. We want to get to know the body in which we're in, and then we want to get to know the world. And oftentimes in a baby's crib, sometimes you'll hang things, and they'll make noises, and they'll reach out and become engaged in the whole educational process, and not only academic education, but cultural education is to reach out and engage. If we were in what we would describe as primitive societies, we'd have to go out and forage for food, and we might even have to kill animals in order to sustain ourselves. The world, the nature of this world that we live in, is designed to engage us. And we become so used to that engagement that we believe that the more stimulated we become through that engagement, the more of life we will have. Because to us, life is a physical experience. And while we get emotional feelings from that experience, those feelings are directly connected to how we feel about that outward experience. And so today in modern society around the world, it's basically designed to keep us totally engaged. If you're not completely actively involved in life around you, then you're either bored or you're sleeping. You're not really living. If we look at that as what the common experience is, then we should also look at the common result of that experience. The common result of that experience is insomnia, boredom, dissatisfaction, irritability, anger, lack of peace, a lack of open-heartedness. I would say sometimes you do see people who are very friendly and expressive of caring thoughts, but that only goes to a limited degree. In other words, it only goes to outward expression. Outward expression invariably leads us to what we would describe as mental ups and downs. For example, if you do a good deed and somebody doesn't appreciate it, how do you feel? You feel like let down, or you feel happy no matter how they receive it? Most people would feel let down. And then they might even go, oh, you don't appreciate me? I'll never do that for you again. And then that very good feeling, that very positive, even outward positiveness, is quickly turned to outward negative consciousness. And most people live in this consciousness all the time. This is what they would describe as normal. Yogis would describe this as common, but not normal. Yoganandaji used to say that everybody had their own unique kind of craziness. And it all stems from our engagement in the world as the basis of how to live. And because everybody has been exposed to this, and we are not trained generally to look further than this, when a person comes to the spiritual life, they tend to be very emotional about it. They are so frustrated with their lives, and they're unhappy to the core of their being, to their heart. But that heart core expresses as tears of sadness or tears of yearning, which is a higher state of yearning, but still emotionally based. So if you seek your loved one or God with an emotional heart, and God doesn't come to you in the way that you expect or want, then you can experience disappointment. And that disappointment can then lead to rejection of God. Oh, you didn't come to me when I wanted you to come, the way I wanted you to come, and I didn't get all the things that I wanted. To heck with you. Or, you must not be there. I must be crazy to think, what was I wasting my time with doing this? The spiritual life, when you come to an ashram, when people came into the ashram at Mount Washington, when Master was there, it was a completely different kind of environment. Because in our educational system, how do you get educated? Well, first the teacher lectures, a discourse, this subject, this subject, this subject. And you have to memorize all this stuff in order to have knowledge on the subject. And then as a part of that, you ask questions. I have a question about this, and a question about that, and a question about this, and answer me, answer me, answer me. There was a very well-educated man who came to see Master once, and he had 3 questions, big questions. And the first question he asked, the Master said, love God. And he didn't quite know what to do with that. So he asked the second question. The Master said, love God. He didn't know quite what to do. He thought he'd try again. So he said, and what's the answer to this question? And Master said, love God. And Master walked out of the room. Because you can never achieve spiritual understanding only academically. You can understand intellectually the process and the theories behind it, but you'll never have the experience if you only use your mind. You have to use, we can say the heart, but we might describe it in a more global way as to say the core of your being, however you want to describe that. In the center of the core of your sense of self. Master described the center of the universe for each of us as a point of intuitive perception within our own hearts. So that heart center is our core, but the spiritual eye is our conscious connecting, well, we call it the broadcasting station, and the heart the receiving station, but it's one. We broadcast and receive simultaneously. Kriyanandaji grew up extremely well educated. He went to, he went to good schools when he was a young man, but he had a natural intellectual ability, extremely intelligent and extremely interested in understanding, literature and history and just a wide variety of subjects. So at a young age, he was very well educated, very well read. And as a result of that very good education, he came to the point where he realized that he, as well educated as he wasn't happy. And so he went through that process in his own consciousness to recognize that he needed to do something. And when he did that, the universe presented to him the autobiography of a yogi. And when he read that book, he recognized the solution to his lack of happiness. He realized that he wasn't going to achieve the resolution of the circumstance of having sought outwardly to be happy and recognized that that was never going to happen. How he was going to resolve this? He recognized that Yogananda had that solution. And so he went to the ashram, and when he went to the ashram, he went from just what you would describe as everyday life as a young man in the time and society that he grew up in, to like another planet. the ashram was just a completely opposite environment. Instead of seeking fulfillment outwardly, everybody was seeking fulfillment inwardly. But the problem was is he didn't know quite how to do it. He didn't have the tools that you need in order to connect inwardly. And of course, shortly after arriving, he learned the Hamsa and the energization, just the way we share it today. And he began to practice meditation. But of course, even if your nature is in tune with these things, you may become predisposed to a quick remembrance of previous incarnations as a meditator. It still takes time. There's still everybody, even Master, who was born an avatar, went to the ashram for training. And today I want to talk about a specific aspect of this training. Because we need this in order to understand the core process of how this works, of how we're going to go from perceiving life as outward ups and downs to perceiving life inwardly as a ever new expression of bliss. When Kriyanandaji first came to the ashram, it was his natural inclination. He asked a million questions. He says, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about that? And if he couldn't quite absorb the answer, he said, well, that's too much. I'm going to, people living without eating, I can't handle that right now. I'm going to put it on the shelf. And just do the things I think I can try to digest mentally. So his mindset had been academic. One day, for the first time, he found himself privately with Yogananda, out in the desert, 29 palms. And he thought, well, I need to take advantage of this. I need to take advantage of the fact that it's, one-on-one with the Master. Sir, what does Om sound like? Master went, Om. That was it. So Swamiji said, well, he'll try again. Well, how do you hear it? And then there's a position that you use for closing the ears. Master did it, put his hands down. Didn't say a word. Sometime later, after a period of time, Kriyanandaji had another conversation with Yogananda. He said, sir, I feel my mind is restless. I feel when I sit to meditate, it just keeps moving forward, and I can't seem to calm it sufficiently. He said, well, it's because you used to talk so much. Talking is one of the most powerful ways that we cause ourselves to be more restless. And it's not something that we've ever thought about generally. We use the gunas. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the gunas, but tamaguna, that which pulls you down, sattva guna, which lifts you up, expands you, and rajaguna, which generally takes you upward or downward, or can just spin you around in the middle. But it's activating. And so we generally in the spiritual life want to do elevating things, things that lift us up. And we don't want to associate with things that pull us down into ego consciousness, that lead to suffering and moodiness and unhappiness. So, if you've heard of any of Swamiji's music, then you know that it's elevated. Compared to most music, it takes you into a higher mental state, a higher state of consciousness. And through the association with that higher consciousness, just like the chanting that we do, you begin to feel more associated with upliftment rather than indulgence and downward pulling energies. And there's really nothing that we do outwardly that's more sattvic than devotional chanting, opening up the heart, and not emotionally, but communing with the impersonal, omnipresent love of spirit. This is very sattvic. And of course, meditation is really the same effort of trying to reach up and expand out into spirit. So many years ago, I had the opportunity to come to India, 1977, and I was with Swamiji in Kashmir for 4 months. And for a number of those months, we were in seclusion. And in that seclusion, we didn't speak. We did not speak for weeks on end. And it's always been a part of the Ananda culture to take seclusion. And a part of seclusion is keeping silence. And even if you remember a master's visit to Mahatma Gandhi in the Autobiography of a Yogi, Gandhiji was in the practice of keeping silence one day a week. And this practice is a very common and supported practice. It's something that you can't easily do if you're going to the office. But you could do it if you went shopping. And you know, there's Monis is common in India, and maybe they have a chalkboard and they write little things on it. And I had experienced 1 day or 2 days or 3 days of silence in the seclusions that we'd done previously, but this was an extended period of seclusion. And days of not speaking, or weeks really, and even though it was my job to go out and buy food, as a Westerner not speaking Hindi, maybe I said a handful of words, just enough to buy the food. No conversation, no ongoing outward dialogue. And with hours of meditation and not speaking, the mind goes into a deeper state of stillness than ever before. And I, for the first time, really experienced this on an extended period of time. And to that point in my life, I had never gone deeper. It was really an absolutely amazing blessing in my life. But one day, I was feeling a little like, you know, seclusion's hard work. It's really hard work sitting around doing nothing. Well, you're not actually doing nothing. You're focusing very intently. That effort, that act of will to stay inwardly focused is an act of will. And it takes determination and endurance to focus the mind for that extended period of time. And so one day I was feeling a little like restless. You know, like I needed something to dissipate the efforts that I was making, to just relax a little bit. So Swamiji had gone in silence with Seva, who was the other person there. They would often take a walk in the afternoon over to Nishapag, and in silence. And then if we were all would walk with him, and if somebody tried to talk with him, which they often would try to, we would get in the middle of it and, excuse me, Swamiji's in silence, and you know, maybe because they wanted to know, well, who is he and why is he here? And we would take on that responsibility so that he didn't have to speak. And so on this day, they went on the walk, and I felt like I could make some noise without disturbing, you know, anybody. And so I had a guitar there, and I pulled it out and started to play one of Swamiji's songs. These songs that are so calming and peaceful. And as soon as I started to play it, I went from this really calm, quiet, still space to come gather round will sing the blues. It was like, oh my goodness. Swamiji's uplifting music was suddenly incredibly rajasic. It was Rajasattva compared to that peace, that calm, still space. And by recognizing this, it helped me to understand that this process of becoming quiet inside is something that goes to ever higher levels. That this, Master said, that silence is the altar of spirit. Think about this. If you have had children and they're of the talkative age and they do nothing but yak, 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 talk, 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 and they just don't stop. And even though we're used to action, an active mind, that can be like, oh, go do that over there, give me a break, I need some quiet. But then if you go out into nature, which is quiet, and you feel more peaceful, have you ever gone into the forest and just sat down under a tree and let yourself be in the forest? It's actually really noisy. Bugs are loud. Bugs are really loud, all that buzzing and the crickets going, and the wind in the trees and animals, birds chirping. It's actually really loud. But compared to all of the loudness of society, it's relatively quiet. And most people would describe that quietness as true quietness. It's not. They've taken many people into these chambers that have absolutely no sound in them. They can only stay in for a few minutes. They can't handle the quiet. And they've made these sensory deprivation chambers where you float in the water and it's dark and there's no sound. And people, they're trying to consciously relax and begin to be in stillness. And it takes them an act of will in order to just to handle that no action going on. When we meditate, we're going into deeper and deeper levels of stillness. We're going inside to this place where there is no vibratory outwardness, but there is more and more subtle vibration. The sound of the subtle vibrations of the universe is Om. But we can't hear that inner stillness, and of course, connected to, we tend to think, well, you're going to hear something, or you're going to feel something when you meditate. We don't realize that they go together. Your stillness is at the foundation of every spiritual experience. The higher the experience, the stiller you are, the calmer you are. You cannot experience really high states of consciousness with a restless mind. They are completely opposed. And this restlessness is basically what causes us not to experience that which is already there and as a natural part of our nature. So silence, the practice of not speaking, is a very powerful tool in the arsenal of the devotee. Practicing silence. Now, you haven't talked since I've been talking. And you may, because you're in this environment, and we just meditated, you feel calmer and more peaceful. But I suspect that there's still some stuff rolling around in there. Yes? Take a moment right now and assess your inner quietness. Assess what it feels like for no sound to be flowing through your vocal cords and resonating in your head. And now, let's together chant Om for a minute. And of course, Om is a sattvic vibration. But I want you, while you're chanting Om, not only to feel Om, but I want you to listen to how loud it is. The volume inside your head, the actual physical noise that's made when you're when you're vocalizing. Okay, let's do it together. Now do it again. Take your thumbs and close your ear flaps. And let's do it again. Okay, and you hear it's louder. You hear more how loud it is inside. Imagine staying absolutely quiet for an extended period of time. And when I say quiet in an extended period, I mean to the point which it's more natural not to speak than to speak. We're so used to speaking all the time that we think it's just natural to talk. But if you extend your period of silence for days or weeks, it will become more natural not to speak. And then when you make noise with your voice, you'll realize it's incredibly loud. Compared to the outward world, it doesn't seem so loud. But just like the insects in nature are louder than outward general life, the voice is incredibly loud when compared to silence. And then if you think about the loudness of musical instruments, let's take the trumpet, for example. So you take the trumpet and you squeeze your lips together and you go, and then out of the trumpet, it's so loud that you could hear it over a battlefield. That's really loud. It takes a lot of energy to do that. It takes an incredible amount of energy to talk. So not only are we experiencing quiet, not only are we not indulging in restlessness, but we're withdrawing into our, or not expending all of that energy that can be used for other pursuits. And so it gives us more power. We attune to more power because we're not wasting so much of life as we waste time digesting food. We waste time doing all kinds of things that everything takes energy. If we could, well, I want to come back to this point is that we've been sitting here, you've not been talking. But you haven't been actively quiet. You've just been passively quiet. When you become consciously quiet, it completely changes the situation, just like we do. How many breaths have you taken in the last 15 minutes? Hundreds, right? Take stock of your mental state right now. Now, inhale through the nose. Hold. Exhale through the mouth. Once more. Inhale through the nose. Hold. Exhale through the mouth. Breathe normally. And open your eyes. Take stock. 2 conscious breaths. You feel different. Yes? You feel more connected. You feel calmer. If you are silent consciously, the same thing will happen to your state of stillness. The more you practice quietness, silence. When my kids were growing up and they would get too chatty for me, I would just say, we had a secret technique. When you got into the car, we'd say 1, 2, 3. Get in the car, sit in your seat, buckle your belt. 1, 2, 3. So whenever they got in the car, 1, 2, 3, they know 1, 2, 3. Okay. Well, I needed a new signal, so to get them to put space between the words. I didn't tell them to shut up, be quiet. I said, put space between the words. 1, 2, 5. They still know it. 1, 2, 5. With my kids was consciously put space between the words. And it completely changed the atmosphere. Usually this was in the car. It suddenly became quieter. And even if we spoke, there was space between the words, and it became less excessively active. If we will consciously spend time not speaking, and that's the whole key. You can be at work. You're at work, you're working at your desk, you're not talking to anyone, but you're not consciously not speaking. You're just passively not speaking. Consciously don't speak for periods of time during the day. Just the way you might, if you're a Kriya Bond, you practice a few Kriyas during the day anytime you want. If you are practicing Hang Sa, you can do Hang Sa for a few minutes anytime during the day. It's all good. You may be even practicing japa, where you repeat some mantra or holy uplifting thought regularly during the day. But you may during the day be listening to Swamiji's music. But you may not realize that you can listen to too much uplifting music. It creates motion in the mind. It's an uplifting motion, but if you can attain a higher level of stillness, then constant noise, even if it's positive noise, is rajasic, it's activating. One of the key things that we do when we chant, and something that we want to do as we become more inwardly focused, we want to do this all the time. We take everything in and up. Take every life experience into the stillness and offer it up. So when you're chanting, you're going not to higher and higher levels of outward fervor like many people do. You're going actually to deeper and deeper levels of stillness. Chanting should take us to stillness, not to emotionalism. The heart expanded in stillness, not through the emotions. This is the difference between outward feelings and inward feelings. Inward feelings are connected to stillness. Outward feelings are active and they're restless, and result in a downward dip. If you have a high meditation, you never come out and you're depressed because it's over. You're thankful. You go, wow, that was really nice. You don't go, I'm not feeling it. My mind is going outward. You don't have that depression. The conscious practice of not speaking is extremely powerful. Master did not allow people to speak around him unless there was a reason for that conversation. And in the early years around Swamiji, one of the ways that he determined whether a person could really be in his orbit was whether they could comfortably be quiet. Whether they could be in his presence and not have to talk. Because, and this conscious stillness should then be carried through to how we listen. Because stillness is not a passive state, it's an expansive state. So when we're still, we're expanding into ever increasing embracing and open listening with the spirit, not with the ears, the outward ears. And so when we learn to be in stillness, then as we relate to life from stillness, we can see more and more subtle understandings about what we're absorbing. And this is what we do in the spiritual life, mostly is we absorb things rather than intellectually categorize them. Categorizing our intellectual understanding of teachings is just a very basic beginning thing to do, something that we need to do according to our nature, but nevertheless, it's just the very beginning. And if we never get to this inner transformation, then we're not really eating the meal, we're only, we got stuck on the appetizers. So, experiment with consciously practicing silence, not speaking. And again, you can do it for a minute, for 5 minutes, for an hour, a day, a week, a month, or a year. In the early years, we were much more experimenting with these things, and some people would work in the community because we supported them, and they would write notes even at work, And they would go for extended periods of time without speaking. This isn't right for everyone all the time, but it's something that you should experiment with. And even go through the awkwardness of not speaking when you go shopping and you have to pay for the food. And there may be some conversation that needs to take place, usually not very much. But you can nod or go, they'll understand. And even if they don't, they'll get over it. They might think you're a little odd. Get some, enjoy the oddness of it. When you practice seclusion at home, if something comes up, then you just write a note. I still have some notes that Swamiji wrote me when we were in seclusion. The shopping list. I need some, something. Or could you, run this errand for me? Or sometimes something larger than that. But it's actually quite easy, and it can be fun. But most importantly, it will bring you to a deeper understanding and experience of what we're trying to do and how we're connecting to deeper and deeper levels of stillness. Consciously listen to yourself speaking and actively cut it down. And when you're in a conversation with someone, let them talk. If you're swapping what we say, fish stories, oh yeah, I went fishing and my fish was this big, and then the other person goes, oh, well, I went fishing and my fish was this big. And the other one, well, I had one this big, but then it got away. And oh, yeah, I remember the one that got away from me. And oh, then we tipped over the boat. And it goes on and on and on. All this restless activity towards no positive purpose. And so then what we can do is let the others tell their stories. So you say, oh, look, what happened to you? Oh, what happened to you? Oh, what happened to you? And you can be in silence. Rajarsi Janakananda used to be in meetings sometimes. He was an incredibly successful businessman. And he said sometimes when he was in these meetings, and people had to talk, everybody had to have their chance to speak. And he would just sit there and say very little until everybody had had their chance. And while they were speaking, he would just be inside, moving the energy up and down the spine. Just being in the inner connection, eyes open. He was present outwardly, but inwardly, he was free from that. And then he had the capability that when it finally became his turn, he would then just very quickly and easily say, here's what we need to do. And everyone, oh yeah, okay, that's a good idea. And then that's what they do. Consciously be inwardly connected. Consciously speak less. And then, of course, when you speak truth. Be positive. Be consciously flowing towards positive themes. There's gossiping, excessive talk on generally good subjects creates restlessness, creates a sense of the need for motion in the mind. What's the hardest thing to do when you sit to meditate? Still the mind. By speaking less, you will automatically cause the mind to calm down a noticeable percentage of time. Maybe not in the very beginning, but through the extended practice of silence, you will learn to experience deeper and deeper levels of inward connectedness. It's a very powerful tool. So I encourage you to consciously practice silence. Take this consciously into your meditation, but then also take this practice and this consciousness to all of your activities. And even amidst the most active outward activities, remember to stay connected. There should always be a part of you connected to this inner silence. Namaste.